Hi, can you hear me okay? Awesome. Okay. Just wanted to start off by saying that I'm pretty excited to have this debate with you. I've seen some of your debates and your comments, so this is cool. I wanted to start off with some kind of boring definitions. So in some cases, non-white lies between spouses can be appropriate. White lie I'm defining as a lie about a small or unimportant matter which someone tells to avoid hurting another person. As compared to just a regular lie, which I'm going to define as to make an untrue statement with the intent to deceive. Some being at least one, and appropriate being suitable or proper in the circumstances. So for the purposes of this debate and evaluating this debate, I'm going to say that the audience can imagine there being at least one instance of an appropriate circumstance where a lie can occur between spouses, then they should vote pro. Now, I'm going to talk about a few different reasons why I think that in some cases it's going to be appropriate. The first, I'm going to talk about my problem kind of with absolute thinking. The second point I'm going to talk about is going to be the real issue rather, with deception. And finally, I'm sure this will come up throughout the debate, are like examples of circumstances in which I think we can discuss about how that would be appropriate. So first of all, my problem with absolute thinking is that it oversimplifies the world into black and white. And so obviously, I guess the other side of this resolution would be it's never okay to tell a lie, or, it's always okay, but I don't think anyone would, defend it's always okay. So absolute thinking oversimplifies the world, and I've kind of mentioned this in some other debates, but seeing this especially now in the political realm is like this really black and white polarization. And I think that absolute beliefs are just simple and easy to comprehend, but they're false positives that offer us a false sense of security and ultimately do much more harm than good, especially on an individual level. It causes a lot of anxiety. And wow, almost time's already up. It causes a lot of anxiety because we see that, there's a lot of contradictions that can occur when one adheres to, an all or nothing kind of attitude and thought process. It also stands in the way, absolute thinking stands in the way of empathetic thinking. And I think that putting ourselves in other people's shoes is a really important trait and skill that we need to have in order to, advance as a society or just cooperate in groups of people and kind of, be successful as humanity. And then in my next speeches, I'll go a little more into, what the issue with deception is, and then some examples.
Great. Just making sure. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, great. So my position today is pretty simple, and it looks like we're going to argue a little bit about definitions today. Let me start with mine. My definition of a white lie is not much different than yours. It's a lie that is either harmless or trivial, often told to avoid hurting another person. Thus, a non-white lie is a lie that is harmful and is non-trivial, and one that is typically told for selfish reasons. I'll call these dark lies in the debate, just because non-white lie is a little bit of a difficult construction. All right, appropriate, and this word is really important. Something that is suitable or proper. That means correct or right. An example would be a psychiatrist having sexual relations with their patient is inappropriate. It's not the way that sort of relationship is properly done. This topic is about marriage. So I will talk in this debate in terms of marriage. To simplify, are dark lies ever appropriate in a marriage? Think of it this way. Would a marriage counselor tell you that a non-white lie is a good part of marriage? Appropriate means proper and suitable, not simply common or forgivable or understandable. We're talking about the things that a marriage should be and the qualities that we should strive for in marriage. This is not about what is acceptable or appropriate. We're also not talking about any single marriage. It's not about Bob and Sue's marriage. The world is filled with an amazing array of diverse possibilities. We're speaking about the concept in aggregate because that's what's most meaningful and was most useful to people who are understanding marriage and who are going into marriage and dealing with their marriages. It's also better for us to debate and judge. We can't look at every single instance in the world and make a judgment, but we can talk about the ideal of marriage, the intent of marriage, and the purpose of marriage. So that's going to be a key contending point, I'm sure, between us. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So what is marriage? Ultimately, marriage is about forming a family, a bond of love and kinship. Family is about trust, the ultimate partnership, one flesh. At the foundation of trust is honesty. Without honesty, trust withers and dies. All lies, especially dark lies, which are harmful, significant, and selfish, destroy trust. To destroy trust is to harm the foundations of marriage. While it can survive this, it's not good for marriage. Thus, it is not appropriate for marriage as an idea. Lies are, in fact, antithetical to the core meaning of marriage. So I'm going to have two tests we're going to apply throughout the day. One is the dark lie test. If a lie is not harmful, if it is not significant, and it is not selfishly motivated, then it's not really a dark lie and it falls outside the resolution. It's a white lie. And the appropriate to marriage test. Is the dark lie in keeping with the spirit of trust in a marriage? Would a marriage counselor advise this action for a married couple? With that, I'll pass it back to the affirmative.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off. I have to disagree with some of your definitions. First of all, I think that kind of this depiction of white lies being harmless. I mean, yes, that's the way we think of them typically, right? If we compliment someone's cooking when it was just okay, we think of it as a harmless lie. For the record, I don't think all white lies are harmless, and there's plenty of marriage counselors and things like that who will kind of back that up as saying that white lies should be discouraged in marriage in general. But I also disagree with this notion that only dark, malicious lies are the topic of this debate. I think that kind of puts first of all, an unfair burden on the pro, and it's not really what the resolution calls for, because it's not about looking at a marriage holistically and saying, okay, you can go into this with the idea that you can lie sometimes. I don't think that's the way that the resolution kind of poses this question. This question is more about, if you're in a situation, is there ever a situation you can be put in which a non-white lie can be appropriate? And so I do think that for the purposes of this debate, Bob and Sue examples are relevant, because we never go into a relationship kind of with that intent of like, okay, there's going to be some times when I lie. No, but this question is about, in certain events, will this be okay and appropriate? And so again, I'm going to argue that it is. And I think we both kind of have a general, I have a feeling we're going to agree, but that the real issue with deception is selfishness. So, this has been studied, and I think also just common knowledge is that people's aversion to deception isn't, when people say don't lie to me, what they really mean is don't be selfish. And so if you disentangle deception from selfishness, I think that you can see that there will be instances when lies, even if they're not trivial or about something kind of meaningless, like something more significant, then we can see that there are cases, even in marriage, in which lies are appropriate. Also, I think we shouldn't discount scenarios in which abusive marriages exist, because in that case, even selfish lies are very much appropriate. And again, I think that for the purposes of this debate, individual kind of instances are more important than looking at this holistically, because again, nobody goes into a marriage or relationship with that idea of like, okay, lies are going to be, I'm going to make a point to lie sometimes when it's okay because it's okay. No, it's about specific instances that might be permissible.
Okay, let me tackle some of your rebuttals. Let's talk about white lies. White lies are in the definition of the debate, so I had to go look it up because it's up there. So we have to talk about that distinction. It says non-white lies, so we can't talk about white lies. We can argue a little bit about what lies are white lies and what lies are not white lies. But generally speaking, a white lie means it is relatively harmless. We are permitted to do it because it may, yes, you look nice in that dress, or sure, I'd love to go to the theater today. These are white lies. They may not be entirely true, but the fact that they're not true probably doesn't matter, because you're happy and loving and you want to express those things to somebody else and you think that's the best way to do it. That's fine. We don't really want to talk about those. So, but we can look at your instances. If you have a specific lie, bring it up. We can try to decide if it's a white lie or a dark lie under those circumstances. That's fine. But we don't want to talk about white lies here today, right? So that's why I have the dark lie test. Okay, second of all, Bob and Sue are relevant, you're saying. But look, I don't think that's fair. You talk a little bit about taking away ground from you. But if I have to defend the particulars of every marriage and every human being on the planet, I can't do that. It's ridiculous. That wouldn't be a very useful definition or a resolution to debate. However, we can talk about any situation when, in general principle, a type of lie is good or bad for the idea of marriage. That's something we can discuss. And it gives you plenty of ground in order to give me examples or to argue reasons why a classification of lie or a situation of a lie would be appropriate for the idea of marriage, that it upholds trust and it upholds the things that we're looking for in a marriage. So I think you've got plenty of ground on that. I think my definition is perfectly fair. I want to respond to absolute thinking. Yeah, I tend not to be about absolute thinking, but again, we need to discuss a general idea. And this is not about if something is okay, it's about if something is appropriate. This is about ideals and the meaning of the word marriage and how other actions fit into that meaning and intersect with it. Empathy, I agree, is an important thing. But again, we need to look at this ideal so that we can give appropriate advice to people in marriage or people who are looking to enter in marriage. You mentioned a little bit abusive marriages. I'm assuming you're going to bring that up, but let me state straight away, the problem with that is you're talking about something that is already a failed marriage. So in the circumstance of a marriage that has terrible unmarriage-like circumstances in which there is no trust, in which there's barely even that much love, you've already sort of gone outside the bounds of marriage, and the lie is really a defense against something that isn't marriage. It's a defense against abuse and hurtfulness. So I don't think that's a good example, but I will pass the mic back to you.
Okay, so I'll start off, I guess, kind of with this idea of is a lie good or bad for the idea of marriage? Again, I think this is a little bit unfair in terms of ground, just because I do think it's important to count abuse in this, and I'll go into that later. But if we're just looking at is it good or bad for the idea of marriage, I'm going to kind of refer to a British author here. His name's Alan de Botton, and he writes books on philosophy's relevance to everyday life. And he suggests that some lies are actually can be out of loyalty to a greater truth, and because we aren't always rational beings, sometimes we may need falsehood. So what he says is that what makes falsehood so necessary, especially in relationships, is our proclivity for making unfortunate associations. So it is, in theory, of course, entirely possible to love someone really deeply and at the same time want to spend a significant amount of time in solitude, for example. But in our own minds, the rejection of our time feels synonymous with the rejection of our being. So we're forcing any half-decent person to lie to us by the obtuseness of our thought process. It is because our spouse might be in the grip of a falsehood, like if you don't want to spend time with me, you can't love me, that we have to offer a dose of untruth. So I was stuck at work, or by which we can make sure that a bigger truth, I love you, remains safe. And now I want to kind of draw a distinction though between this being a white lie and this being a dark lie, as you say, because if you think about the situations in which someone might lie, this it's not always a trivial lie. There could be extenuating circumstances in a marriage, or your partner could be going through a really hard time, or it could be just stressful part of the relationship. So there could be really bad timing to lie, to tell a lie like this, and it could be very significant, right? And in these cases, that protection of the overall truth is important. And I'll just kind of go over kind of a few other examples that might point out to how much more significant this is. I just spoke with someone actually before this round who's a soldier, who told me that he used to lie all the time about his days when he'd come back from home after getting shot at all day and say his day was fine. So that's a pretty significant lie. That's his life is at stake every day at work, but when he comes home, for the purposes of easing her mind, he would tell lies. I think there's also cases, especially of people, it's very common in men apparently, who lie about cancer diagnosis. They tend to more often than not more often than women, lie to their wife and kids about their diagnosis. Again, a very significant big lie that's not necessarily harmful to a relationship. If we can go into more details once my next speech comes up. Yeah.
Sure. In research for this debate, I went out and looked for marriage advice columnists speaking on the subject of marriage. Let me read a couple of these, and then I'm going to bring them back in as analysis. So this one's from The Bump, the Journal of Pregnancy and Marriage, and it says the following. Honest and open communication is the key ingredient to trust. Any marriage relies on complete trust to survive, even if it hurts. A person's mate is entitled to know the person he loves is hurting or having some kind of problem. Otherwise, he is cheated out of an opportunity to help. Discovering the person you love is dishonest cuts deep. This one is from the Peaceful Family blog, Marcus and Ashley Cushy, marriage counselors. Trust in marriage is extremely vital to your marriage to thrive. Trust is the most important thing that makes pursuing any relationship worthwhile. Without trust, a healthy marriage or relationship cannot exist. And this one is from The Guardian, from the counselor Tim Loft. There are 3 keys to an enduring relationship. Love may be important, but communication, respect, and trust are essential. Now, let's look at the examples that you give us of a soldier who lies about the experience of war. This is not a good idea for him to do. He may have some intent to be compassionate towards his wife, but it is beyond expectation that he would be unaffected by the rigors of battle. He may get angry, he may be snappy, and she wouldn't understand if he doesn't tell her why he's having these feelings. She might think he's angry at her, that he's not in love with her anymore. This kind of miscommunication and lack of honesty leads to greater problems. That is the problem with lies. All lies, as you say, all lies can be very bad in marriage, but black lies especially. Even though he has good intent, he is going to destroy trust between them. They need to be a family. They need to be one unit. She needs to understand what his pain is and work to try and help him with it. Without that, it's impossible. The same about somebody dying of cancer. That is an incredibly important thing for a spouse to know. It's not a marriage if you don't have that kind of trust. It's just a sort of sexual relationship, a matter of convenience. Real marriage is about heart to heart, person to person, a team working together to overcome life's challenges. So these are not good examples of how a lie is in keeping with the spirit of marriage. They're examples of why a lie undermines and destroys the essential trust, which is at the very heart of the contract of marriage. Now, you talked a little bit about love and that the greater truth of love may justify a mistruth of a lie. But again, according to my citations and what I believe, trust is at the heart of marriage. Love is important, but love happens in all kinds of relationships. A marriage is about a teamwork. It's about trust. It's about building family. And lies are almost always antithetical to that ideal. Pass the mic back to you.
Okay. I think the fact that you always antithetical kind of just immediately puts it back to my case, because that's the point, right? It's that it's not always antithetical. And I think that there's a huge difference between what you're saying, in which it's not a good idea to tell a lie like that, versus whether or not it can be appropriate. Again, even if, and I agree, trust is crucial to a marriage. I agree with that. However, I don't think that every single lie necessarily will destroy a marriage. And I think not understanding the place that a person can be put in, or situation that they can be put in, and not empathizing with that, I think that's I think that's just a huge problem. I think to say it's not a real marriage if you tell a lie in a certain situation is very unempathetic. And again, like if we look at the situation with the soldier, for example, it may not be the best thing he can do. It doesn't mean it's not appropriate for him to, want to ease, or to think, out of, the concern of his wife, that it's the best option in the moment. Again, timing and context is very important. I think we're assuming that in a vacuum, we always have to be honest at all times. If someone's having a really, really bad, day, or a really bad kind of week period in their life, it may not be the best time for complete and total honesty. If they, for example, just lost a parent or something, you probably don't want to hear that your spouse's, life is in peril every single day. That's probably not the most comforting thing to feel. So in certain cases, again, I think time and place is very relevant. in terms of when a lie can be appropriate, whether, you think it's dark, or how you say, dark lie. It's not a white lie. It's a significant lie, but it can still be appropriate. Same with diagnosis for cancer. Yes, it can be very helpful to have support from your family and your wife. But again, if you're a little empathetic, and put yourself in the shoes of someone who maybe wants to enjoy a certain amount of time with their spouse and family, without being pitied or without being seen in a certain way. Again, whether or not you think it's a good idea doesn't make it an inappropriate lie. It can still be okay in some cases to have something like that, and I don't think it undermines the foundations of a marriage to kind of preserve the final days of happiness, or to prolong comfort or feelings of safety for a spouse with a lie such as the ones that I presented.
I advise the judges to keep in mind what appropriate means. Appropriate is not, can my marriage survive this lie? Appropriate is not, will this lie make me feel good? Appropriate is about, is it in keeping with the spirit and idea of marriage? It's not appropriate to do a big loud belch at the dinner table. Will your family survive? Yes. Will dinner go on? Yes, it will. But is it appropriate behavior? No, it's not. Is it appropriate to sleep with your lawyer? No, it's not. Could you do it? Yes, in many cases you can. Appropriate is a standard by which we judge what is right behavior and wrong behavior. Does that mean it's an absolute moratorium? No, it doesn't work that way in the social sphere. But you have to ask yourself, the best test is to say, look, I'm a marriage counselor. I'm advising people on what would be the best course of action in your marriage. Is the best course of action to lie to your spouse? I would say, no, it's not. I said the word almost because I, as a person, am not very absolutist. But I do have ideals, and I do like to follow them. That was a slip of the tongue. But the pro needs to give you a good case, a convincing case in which a lie is told, and it is for the good of the marriage, not for the good of one spouse or another, but for the good of the partnership, the marriage, the meaning of the social contract. Let me tell you a little personal story I had. I have a great marriage. I've been married for 16 years now. And, my wife and I live in this tiny 300-foot travel trailer 24/7. We've never yelled at each other. We don't really have fights. We get a little angry sometimes. The only time my marriage was ever in any danger was when I lied to my wife. I got a pay cut at work. I was having a dispute with my office. They demoted me, gave a pay cut. I was kind of ashamed of that. I thought she would be angry with me. I thought she might be hurt. The difference in the pay wouldn't really impact our income. She asked me, are you getting paid the same? And I said, yes, because I was afraid. And maybe I lacked trust that she would be supportive, which was stupid because she always is. And when she found out, because inevitably these things get found out, she was furious. And it destroyed her trust in me, and it made her question my love for her, because if I loved her, I would trust her. And that was the one point in my marriage where we had real challenges. And it wasn't because I'd done something mean or cruel. It was because I deceived her. And that is the power of what lies do to marriage. It may be hard to tell the truth, but you really should. This is not about what can happen or what does happen. It's about what should happen. And as judges, put yourself in the seat of a marriage counselor and whether you would advise a married couple to lie to each other. Thank you.
Okay, so again, I'm going to kind of go back to what I said before about this being an unfair burden for the pro, because you've essentially made this debate about whether or not it's appropriate to lie to a partner in general, and whether or not a marriage counselor would tell you, like, hey, should you lie to your partner? Again, I don't think that that's what anybody kind of reading the resolution would interpret this as. I think this is very much a debate about whether or not there are cases in which any substantial lies can be appropriate. Again, my definition for appropriate is proper in the circumstances. I think that your definition about is it in keeping in spirit with of marriage, again, is kind of an unreasonable definition. Again, if we're talking about marriage counselors, whether or not they would say it's the best course to lie in marriage, again, nobody really advises, right? Nobody thinks that the lie is the best possible option. But that's not what the debate is about. The debate isn't about, is lying always the best thing you can do? No, it's about, is it ever appropriate? Is it ever proper? Are there ever circumstances under which it would be proper to lie? I acknowledge the power of what lies can do to marriage, but again, just because it's not the best option doesn't mean that in some cases it's not appropriate. And again, I will kind of bring back the issue also of abusive relationships. A marriage is a marriage. If you wanted to make this about spouses in a marriage, that is, it counts as a marriage. It certainly falls within the resolution, and it's a huge case in which lies can be essential to surviving. So just in and of itself, we have a huge case of appropriate lies. But again, even if we're talking about a marriage that we're trying to have be successful, I think that like I was saying, because we aren't always rational beings, certain context, certain time and place in situations in our marriages calls for certain significant lies sometimes, or at least makes it understandable. And also, I think the fact that you're saying that a counselor would never say it's okay to lie to a spouse is wrong. I'm certain there have been cases where a marriage counselor would advise that in, again, certain contexts, it's not okay, or it is okay. And for the purposes of evaluating this debate, again, it's if the audience can walk away imagining of any situation where it can be permissible, then already that's a vote for pro.
My opponent, charming and respectful that she is, ends her debate with what I think is a very unreasonable and unfair judging criteria, which is that if anyone anywhere can ever think of any situation in which any lie might be justifiable for the good of any particular person, then okay, great, it's appropriate. That's not how we think of the word appropriate. It can be circumstantial, but the circumstance in this debate is lies told between spouses. The circumstance that we're talking about is marriage. And it's very important that we look at marriage, the meaning of marriage, what it means to be married as the grounds for the debate, not every single person's marriage. We haven't, every situation the pro has brought up, every specific instance, I've had a good counter for as to why that lie is actually not good for the marriage, not good for the couple, not good even for the individual, even though they have a desire to have it. I'm happy, we're out of time, but I'm happy to entertain more, and I think I could refute them all, because trust is essential to marriage. Lies destroy trust. It's the simple formulation by which we do it. I think discussing the meaning of marriage, the purpose of marriage, there's a lot of ways that you could cut that up and define it, is a very fair topic. If you could have given me an example that I couldn't have turned on you, then you might have had a good case, but you didn't. And so, I think it's pretty clear that I'm carrying the resolution under a very reasonable and fair topic of back and forth between the two of us. Abusive marriages, once that has happened, everything is out the window. It's like in a situation of war, certain kinds of acts become acceptable because we have already broken the bounds of civil society and appropriate discourse between human beings. So when you're in an abusive marriage, it's no longer really a marriage. You are trying to survive. It has already completely broken the idea and the intent of the holy union between two people who love each other, trust each other, and have each other's back. That is a situation of monstrousness. And yes, you should do anything you can to get out of it, but that is not what is appropriate for marriage. That's what appropriate for trying to survive a monster who is intent on hurting you. It's true that we're not always rational beings, but think about what happens if we affirm this resolution. It gives people like that guy in the abusive marriage or someone who wants to deceive their spouse an excuse to say, well, you know what? It might be appropriate in my circumstance. I think I am justified here in this case. And that's exactly why people lie. They think they can get away with it. They tell themselves that it is appropriate. But we know with sober thinking and with rational thought that it really isn't. And in the end, what you think will help you will probably hurt you and destroy your marriage. With that, I urge you to vote con in this debate. Thank you.
I've got 3 seconds. Good debate.